Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Mindy Eggen, and I'm excited to introduce to you the Lawn Fawn exclusive collaboration set with Simon Says Stamp. This set is available only at Simon Says Stamp and only while supplies last. So, this is the Christmas in the Desert, all of these fun, familiar characters, except decked out for the holidays. There's a few different bundle options that you can purchase. You can get just the stamp set. You can get the bundle with the color stencil. So you can use these stencils to color in your image versus using your alcohol markers. And then there's also a coordinating die. I find the stencil and the coordinating die so helpful, especially for some of those smaller images. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm laying out most of the images or all of the images, and I'm going to ink them up in the jet black ink from Lawn Fawn. And this is going to be on the 80-pound Neenah Classic Crest cardstock. To do all of my coloring that I'm going to use with the stencil, I'm going to be bringing in my Lawn Fawn ink cubes. And I do have them in this organized more tray. So I have all of my ink cubes here. Any ink cubes will work for coloring in your image. Another thing I do find super, super helpful when you are when you are coloring with these stencils is by having some small blending brushes. These are the detail blending brushes from Gina K Designs that I just keep in a little glass jar. Now I'm going to begin coloring in my image, starting with the cactus. So a lot of times I will use Post-it tape to hold my stencil in place just so it doesn't shift around. Here I did bring in one other blending brush from Altenew, mainly because the cactus is a little bit larger of an area than the rest of the images. But then I do go back to my detail blending brushes to add a little bit of shading with a darker shade of ink on the side of the cactus. Now, there are little stencil areas for the lights, so you can do multicolored lights. Maybe you could use some paste, but I am just going to make all of mine a nice bright red. I just shift the stencil and line them up for each of the lights. On the stencil itself, if you are familiar with the Lawn Fawn stencils, is that there are etched areas on the stencil to help you line it up with that coordinating image. Little hard to see on camera, but definitely be able to see it in person. So I will go through, I'm going to line up all of my images with the stencil and color them in. I really do enjoy using these stencils as much as I do love coloring. Sometimes it's just a little bit easier to grab the stencil, and I can still add shading or depth and dimension with my inks just by coming in with a darker shade of whatever I was using. I did not really keep track of which colors I used for each of the images, mainly because I just kind of grabbed what I saw or what was closest to me in my tray. I do have a swatch book that I would sometimes refer to. For instance, for the Roadrunner, I did refer to my ink swatch book to see what shade of blue that I wanted to use. So I do also find that handy when I'm looking for colors for my images. Another thing that I do find useful is having something to put your ink cube on. Currently, as I was doing this, I just had them placed on my work surface, which is a glass mat. And I found that kind of hard to go back and pick up ink because it was shifting. So I ran into my stash in my other room and I came out with this cute little kind of rubbery or silicone, I guess, type of ink cube holder from Simon Says Stamp. You can also get it in this adorable little pouch. So I'm going to use that for the rest of the coloring with the stencil, is it was just a really nice way for the ink pad to hold in place without sliding all over my glass work surface. I found that I didn't have to really mask off my edges too much like I normally would when it comes to ink blending because of the fact I'm using a smaller blending brush, which does make this go a lot quicker versus having to mask off your edges. Using those smaller blending brushes allows you to not only get into those small areas, but it also helps add those different shaded areas for the image. So I am going to continue moving through the stencil. I did speed it up a little bit, but I'm going to let this play out and color in all of my images, and I will be back in just a little bit. Now that I have all of my images colored in, I'm going to take the coordinating die for each of them, line them up and hold them in place with Post-it tape and run these through my die cut machine. Now I'm going to start building my scene. So what I had thought was using this Peekaboo Backdrop. So I want to create a scene in the top half and in the bottom half. So I'm starting by die cutting this out of white cardstock to give me a white border. I'm going to take another piece of white cardstock. You can see how that's going to fit nicely over the top. And I'm going to shift my frame over to the side there. And I'm doing a lot of eyeballing here. Mainly what I want to do is mask off an area to create the ground. And I want to do this on the top and the bottom. So I'm just using a long strip of Post-it tape to mask that bottom portion off to create kind of my desert floor. To do that, I'm going to be ink blending first with Antique Linen Distress Oxide ink. I'm going to blend this down. This is my lightest color first. And then I'm going to come in with brushed corduroy. And I'm going to just very lightly go at the very top where my Post-it tape is. I probably should have brought in maybe another piece of Post-it tape. I was getting pretty close to the top there where my blue sky is going to be. It thankfully worked out, but you may need to mask that off just a little bit more. So now I have this really nice straight line creating my desert floor. Since I have my inks out for that bottom, I'm going to create that same thing but up towards the top. So again, using my frame as a guide, I put that piece of Post-it tape down to kind of mask off where that center line is going to be. And that's going to kind of protect where my sky is going to be. Next, I'm going to take that same Post-it tape. I'm going to place it up in the top area. And this is going to be my desert floor for the top half of my frame. Then I can come in with those same colors, starting with the antique linen, and then very carefully at the top, adding that brushed corduroy. Then I can remove my Post-it tape and I'm going to reposition this so that it's covering or it's going to mask off my ground. And I want to be able to add a blue sky at the top. So I have my Post-it tape down. I'm going to start my sky with Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide inks, placing that color down. And I am just using my Dome Foam blending tool from Ranger. Now I'm going to come in with Mermaid Lagoon, I think it is, and I'm going to bring that in from the top and blend it down. I did have to bring in my frame once in a while to kind of double check, make sure that I'm getting both colors in that window, and then just kind of help blend the two together back and forth. I can remove my Post-it tape and I am going to mask off that top portion or the ground for the top portion and also the bottom so that I can blend the other part of my sky. So I'll have pretty much two separate scenes here. And you do want to be a little careful or maybe grab a new thing of Post-it tape because tape is hard to stick to ink that is wet. So either just give this a minute to dry or grab some new tape because that'll probably stick better, and also because I'm going off of the edges quite a bit, so it's sticking to my glass work surface. Now, ahead of time, I kind of had laid out what I thought I would have my scene be. So I'm going to bring my ink blended panel over to my Misti tool. I place the frame on the top and also the critters there, and I want to get my sentiment done. So this is a sentiment off of that Christmas in the Desert exclusive stamp set. I'm just going to leave everything there for right now. Nothing is glued in place at this point, and I'm going to stamp the sentiment in the Versafine ink. You want to make sure you have a really good black ink for this, especially when stamping over Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to pop up my frame a little bit. Now, I did go ahead and add a couple things down, but that's kind of where I stopped and decided I wanted to pop my frame up. So I'm adding thin foam strips behind my frame and to all the pieces in between. Then I can remove the backing of that and place this over my blended panel. So it just kind of gives it a little bit more dimension to the front of the card. Those two images that I already have down are going to be in the background of the scene that I'm going to be creating. So those were just added with either a liquid glue or a tape runner. Everything else I'm going to be adding some foam squares to. So I started out with the cactus, which is the largest image out of my set. Put that down off on the side of my sentiment. Then I have my cute little critter up here that's going to be next to the presents. I have the Roadrunner kind of running off with the lights I thought was really cute. And then the turtle wrapped up as a present and our Santa snake. I have him tucked in there too, all added with foam squares. I'm going to add a little detail to the images by taking a white gel pen and just adding some highlights to all the critters. And then I wanted to have some sparkle on here. So I'm going to bring in a unicorn stickles and I'm going to add that to the lights. So both the lights on the cactus and also the one that the roadrunner is running away with. And then that is going to finish off my scene. I will just add it off screen to a card base, an A2 size card base. So I hope you enjoyed today's card project. It gave you inspiration and kind of a look into how I created two separate scenes in this window. All of the supplies used today will be linked down below in the video description and over on my blog. And keep in mind, this is exclusive to Simon Says Stamp and only available while supplies last. Thanks for joining me today.